Village Council regular virtual meeting for August 18th, 2020. I would like to call the meeting to order and ask that everybody either mute or turn off your cell phone or other electronic devices, unless you're on an iPad in Michigan. And I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. There we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of
America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Back to the grid. There we go. Hi, everybody. All right, item 3, quorum checking time. Kristen, you want to check quorum for the next few meetings?
Sure, I'd be happy to. For the September 1st regular meeting, will everyone be in attendance at that meeting?
Plan for virtual versus in person?
Right now, we are planning to remain virtual, but switch to the Zoom platform for that meeting.
Okay, for that meeting, okay?
A lot depends on the numbers and public perception. Go ahead, Kristen.
September 8th study session. Will everyone be available for that meeting? Okay. And then September 15th, regular meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Item number 4, public comment. This is the time of the evening where people who have either joined the meeting virtually or have sent written public comment on items that are not on the agenda can either be heard from or read about at this time. Chris, is there anybody in the queue who would like to address council verbally?
There is one name that I do not recognize as a registered guest who's here to comment on a specific agenda item. Teresa, I'm going to unmute you now to check if you'd like to make a comment.
On a non-agenda item.
Correct. Teresa, you're unmuted now. Would you like to make a comment on an item not on the agenda?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any emails of non-agenda items?
No emails of non-agenda items.
Great. Okay, we can move forward then. Reports. Trustees report. I'll go around the horn here. Jack, you're first.
Yeah, no report.
John?
No report.
Andy?
Was that Penny? Is that me? Nope, no report.
No report for me either.
I got 2 with 1 stone. Bob?
No report, Chris.
None this week, no.
Okay, thank you. Village attorney?
No report tonight.
Village manager?
No report this evening.
And village president? I have no report tonight. So we'll move forward. Approval of the agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item on the consent agenda for a separate vote? We have a motion to approve the final form of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Caladarchi,
Yes.
Trustee Swerk,
Yes.
Trustee Kripe. I think I heard yes.
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn,
Yes?
Trustee Apatow, Trustee Lampier.
Yes.
Thank you.
That motion carries. Thank you. So I have the agenda you sent me has the Hadley proclamation before the consent agenda.
It's up. It does, yes, so that we can have that at the front of the meeting. But if you would like to dispense with the consent agenda, we can certainly do that.
Let's get rid of the consent agenda first.
Okay.
Oh, that's me. Okay, item eight, which is the consent agenda. I will ask the village clerk to read the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the village council meeting minutes for July 21st, 2020, regular virtual meeting. Approval of the warrant list dated July 31st through August 13, 2020, in the amount of $408,919.03. Ordinance number MC3 2020, amending sign regulations to allow display case signs for adoption. Resolution number R52 2020, approving a contract with B Liner Lean Services Incorporated for the repair of the electric plant coping blocks for adoption. And resolution number R56 2020, bulk rock salt purchase for adoption.
Great, thanks, Rob. All right, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So moved.
Good.
Call vote?
Trustee Apatow,
Yes.
trustee Lampier,
Yes.
trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
trustee Caladarchi, trustee Swerk,
Yes.
trustee Kreid.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we'll move forward to the Hadley Day Proclamation. Winnetka's Hadley School is celebrating its 100th birthday and has asked the village to honor it with a proclamation. It says here that Julie Ty from the Hadley School will attend.
Yes, I'm promoting Julie now. Welcome,
Evening, everyone.
Julie.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Julie, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Chris. Can I just say, when you said that you were going to get up and get your soda, you came back with a puppy. So I was pretty sure your puppy's name was Soda.
No, I got the soda too, so. Well, welcome, Julie. I'm glad you're here tonight. What I'd like to do is read the proclamation, and then we'll ask for comments from the audience and council members. Is that okay?
Indeed. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, this is the Hadley Day Proclamation. Whereas Winnetka resident William Hadley became blind in 1915 at the age of 55, and he taught himself Braille due to a lack of educational opportunities for visually impaired adults. And whereas William Hadley, an educator by profession, recognized the need to provide learning opportunities to others like himself who became blind later in life, and in 1920 he began to teach Braille by mail to a Kansas woman who had lost her vision and wanted to be able to read again. And whereas the success of this endeavor led William Hadley to develop additional Braille courses, which he wrote and taught to students across the country and around the world from his Winnetka home at 913 Oak Street. And whereas Mr. Hadley's neighbor and renowned ophthalmologist, Dr. E.V.L. Brown, joined Mr. Hadley to establish the Hadley Correspondence School, which was officially incorporated on January 3rd, 1922, with Dr. Brown serving as the chairman of the Board of Trustees. And whereas Winnetka has been Hadley's home for the past century, and the organization has grown and flourished within the village boundaries. From its founding in the Hadley family home, to its first office at 584 Lincoln Avenue, to expanded offices in the Winnetka Community House, and ultimately to Hadley's recently renovated headquarters at 700 Elm Street. Whereas Hadley recognizes the generous humanitarian people of Winnetka who have played a pivotal role in the launch, growth, and success of Hadley through their donation of time, talents, and financial resources. And whereas today Hadley is the world's largest educator of Braille and provider of distance education for people who are blind or visually impaired worldwide. And over the past century, Hadley has educated hundreds of thousands of people with vision loss from its Winnetka headquarters. And whereas 2020 marks the 100th year that Hadley has been serving people who are blind and visually impaired, and throughout this time, all learning has been provided free of charge to those with visual impairment and their families to ensure that the cost is not a barrier. And Now therefore, the Council of the Village of Winnetka do hereby proclaim August 18th as Hadley Day in honor of its 100th anniversary, and extends its sincere congratulations to Hadley staff, trustees, volunteers, supporters, and students, past and present, for their accomplishments, commitments, and dedication to providing personalized learning experiences to empower individuals with vision loss to thrive at home, at work, and in their communities. And that's our proclamation for today. I guess we can go around the horn. Julie, would you like to say something to kind of kick things off for us?
I would. Thank you so much. This is such a moving proclamation. We're deeply grateful, really honored. Particularly those sections that describe the role of Winnetka citizens in Hadley's success. I mean, it's impossible to really know how many people have benefited as a result of Hadley. And I suspect it's in the millions. You know, we'll never know who they all are, but Winnetka was a part of their story and the success of their lives. You know, 100 years ago, William Hadley, you know, really transformed the way people who are blind or visually impaired can learn. And as you all know, we just recently transformed our headquarters, but last month we totally transformed the way we deliver the work. We have a completely different model now that is very scalable, very, very impactful, and we're really going to be able to scale up by full order of magnitude to help people. And as I was thinking about it tonight, I thought, you know, this is a little bit like Brigadoon. For those of you who remember that story of the village where everybody wakes up for one day every 100 years. And Hadley is a little bit like Brigadoon, where every 100 years we have something that's absolutely spectacular that happens. So thank you for this proclamation, for recognizing our past 100 years and for being a part of our second 100 years. We're deeply, deeply grateful to the council, to the village, to all of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That was wonderful. Rising from the mist. So I'll pass it on to the trustees. Would anybody like to chime in? Go ahead, Rob.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I think it's a great proclamation as well. And it's funny, I grew up here in Winnetka for about 15 years of my early life and didn't really get involved. I didn't know that much about it. It wasn't until I moved to St. Louis when I worked with Anheuser-Busch, where a friend of ours, a dear friend, second daughter was born blind and was at her wit's end until she discovered Hadley.
Wow.
And it truly changed her family's dynamic and got them back on track. And, you know, I just saw the power of having Hadley to team up with and the reach that Hadley has around the country and the world. And it wasn't until we moved back and got involved with Hadley that we saw what a remarkable organization it is and what truly a gem it is to have this organization in Winnetka. So I pass on my incredible congratulations and my you know, and also to the residents of Winnetka that really stand behind Hadley and make sure it stays healthy and vibrant here in Winnetka. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, you know, Julie, you mentioned the people that volunteered. I grew up in this area and had a grandmother who was on the women's board. My mom was on the women's board. There are so many people that we all know right now of different generations in Winnetka that have volunteered and put their heart and soul into Hadley. And for that, it's a remarkable organization. I also want to say that over the past few years, since at least I've been on the council and others too, we've seen Hadley participate in issues that bear on them, one Winnetka being one, and how the organization did it in such a classy and positive manner, which I really appreciated. And I think that not only is Hadley a great resident, if you will, of Winnetka, and obviously a wonderful organization worldwide serving their constituents, but, you know, I've been sort of moved by the impact that Hadley has as a Winnetka participant. And you do it in a great way. You serve your constituents well. And, you know, for the multiple generations, that we all know that have participated in the organizations. In the organization, I thank you for leading this group. I think Mary's on the phone, on the line here, on the call, and so many people have made this a great resident of Winnetka that we are truly appreciative.
Thank you.
Penny,
Hey, Julie. Hey, Mary, if you're there. Again, congratulations on 100 amazing years. It really, Hadley is one of those hidden gems in Winnetka that people don't realize, this organization, the reach it has, but it also has a local reach. And when I was on the school board, the daughter of a family in the neighborhood has a blind child, and it was amazing. I think it was a third grade class that Hadley came in and taught the entire class Braille. And so the class embraced this girl with, quote unquote, a disability, but it enabled the entire class. I mean, they all learned a lot about, abilities, and, we all have abilities and strengths and weaknesses. And what Hadley did for that group was just remarkable. And it wasn't just for the child it was serving, but for the entire group and the entire school community. So I think we are so fortunate to have Hadley in Winnetka, and I hope it always remains headquartered here. And, also after having shepherded a senior citizen around town and realizing how difficult it is, I think we're really lucky to have Hadley in our central business district, because as we make decisions and Hadley speaks up about being mindful about people who have different abilities, I think we make our downtown area better for everybody. And for example, the crosswalk that's been improved to be safer for people with vision problems. Oh my gosh, I tell you what, it's just better for everybody. So in so many ways, truly grateful for Hadley. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, very simply, school, and great to have you as part of our community. Thanks.
Thank you.
I would just echo what everybody said. Thank you for all the good work you do. Thank you for being a great neighbor. One of the things that we did not grow up in Winnetka. The biggest thing that drew us to Winnetka was the level of community involvement and service and the kind of institutions we have here. We talk a lot about, the sorts of things we want to draw to Winnetka, but I think the things that we have in Winnetka, the unique educational facilities, whether it's the Chicago School for Music, whether it's Hadley, I just think we're very fortunate. So thank you and congrats.
Thank you.
Jack, I think you're batting cleanup here.
I think it's just amazing to have such an excellent corporate citizen in the village who helps with global reach of such a outstanding work. I've been here my whole life, and so the Hadley building to me is just a part of my whole world, the way I think about Winnetka. And I've known a lot of people who've been involved in Hadley School over the years, and it's always been outstanding. And again, Hadley appears before the council on a regular basis and is always extremely helpful on the issues that it appears on. So I think it's a great proclamation, and thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think I missed anybody. Well, Julie and Mary, thank you so much for your service, number one. And, I have to say, when I was prepping for this evening and read the proclamation over a few times, we just came out of our sesquicentennial celebration for the village. And it always strikes me the amount of history that we've accumulated in this town, important history over the years. And to realize that the lives that have been touched, as you said, millions of lives have been touched by this organization. It all started out with one unfortunate occurrence to one individual. I think it speaks volumes not only for William Hadley as the founder, but also for the support that the village was able to give him in pursuing this effort and continuing on long after he had left us. So it's really a special thing, and I apologize for not being able to attend your meeting, but I was out of town at that point in time. But I have put my head in from time to time to check it out, and you guys are certainly poised for the next 100 years. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Well,
Chris, we do have some people in the audience that wanted to comment.
let's go. Let's do it. Thanks, Kristen.
So first, I will recognize Mary Nelson. You're unmuted now. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Hadley, and we so appreciate your wonderful comments that, and we feel so much a part of the Winnetka community, and we're grateful for your support, and we feel empowered to continue on with our efforts as we go forward, helping our community and helping the Winnetka community at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And then we also have Louise Holland in the attendance. Louise, you're unmuted now.
Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. As Hadley began, I wrote this out because I get very emotional about Hadley. As we begin our second century, Hadley appreciates the proclamation from the village of Winnetka. For 100 years, Hadley has provided help to the blind and visually impaired throughout the world. We provide classes, lecture, braille instruction, and assistance as how to live a life without vision. And coincidentally, today is August 18th. And in my religion, 18 is a very, very special number, and it means life. So I will now go in my kitchen and raise a glass to life, to Hadley, and to the village of Winnetka. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Louise.
Thanks, Louise.
Okay, that ends the public comment on this item.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. Okay, gang, we'll all else said here, we'll move forward to our ordinance and resolutions. Oh, look, I want to remind everybody that we got some meaty stuff on the agenda from this point forward, so let's be cognizant of the time. Otherwise, my head will explode if we get too close to 10 o'clock. So
We want to see it. We want to see your head explode. Don't give us that option.
thanks, Penny. You're
Chris, excuse me, do you want to call for a motion to proclaim August 18, 2020 as Hadley Day?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was it's not. Oh, was it on here?
Should be.
I guess it was. I'm sorry. Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
All right, folks, before we move forward, may I have a motion to proclaim August 18th, 2020 as Hadley Day?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second?
Roll call vote?
Trustee Apatow,
Yes.
trustee Lampier,
Yep.
trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
trustee Swerk,
Yes.
trustee Caladarchi,
Yes.
trustee Kreip.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. With now a little bit of business being moved forward, ordinances and resolutions. 9A is ordinance number M13 2020, Winnetka Local Business Sales Tax Rebate Economic Relief Program. The village is doing everything in its power to help local businesses weather the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to technical and marketing support and resource sharing that have been on offer to our merchants since the crisis began, the council also has considered providing economic relief. The proposed sales tax rebate would put cash in the hands of business owners who generated sales tax revenue in 2019. Assistant Village Manager Kristen Kazinas is here to review two options based on council study discussions from last week's study session. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Kristen to run through the ordinance and the options in front of us.
Thank you, Chris. I prepared a brief PowerPoint to review the options that we're bringing forward to council. The purpose of the sales tax rebate economic relief program is to provide a financial assistance to Winnetka local businesses that have suffered economic loss during the COVID-19 pandemic. Immediate cash would be available for short-term financial operational needs, such as payroll, payment to suppliers, payment to service providers, or payment of rent and utilities. As discussed in the study session, staff presented what we're now calling as option A. And I prepared a chart to review with you the original option presented, and then a new option B, which we have brought forward as a result of the council feedback from the study session. The key difference between the original option A and option B relates to the formula to calculate the amount of the rebate available to the eligible business. Under option A, 50% of the village's share of the sales tax would be eligible for local businesses for the amount that was received in 2019. Under option B, instead of being a straight 50% formula, there are 3 individual tiers based on the revenue generated by the qualifying business in 2019. Tier 3 would be eligible for $10,000. Tier 2 would be eligible for $5,000, and Tier 1 would be eligible for $2,500. As you can see, the budget under either option A or option B remains not to exceed $400,000, and the number of eligible businesses also remains the same at 95 eligible businesses. We did streamline and present a proposed form for either option. Under option A, there would be a fill in the blank opportunity because it's based on the specific sales tax revenue received by the village at 50%. Option B is even a simpler form because the business merely needs to select which revenue tier they qualify under, and that option indicates what rebate they would qualify for. So at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you.
There we go. Thanks, Kristen. John?
Yeah, the only question I have on the option B form, where it says 2019 sales, should that be taxable sales or any kind of sales? That's really about my only question at this point. Because it is related to sales tax.
Sales, so the question is that taxable sales as it relates to sales taxes generated?
Correct.
Yes, that is the intent of the form.
Okay.
So I think it would be good to clarify that.
If everyone else agrees, I think that makes sense.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. You know, again, since we aren't seeing, you know, we have no chart which companies fall in it. I mean, not that we want to know the individual businesses, but in terms of how many fall into what category. Was there a particular reason that you went 2,500, 5,000, 10,000 rather than going up by $2,500 increments? Just sort of asking, just as a sort of a, you know, procedural was there a logic to it, or that just, how do you come to that conclusion?
Yes. So when we were analyzing the amount of the rebates under the tiered program, we looked at the underlying confidential data and looked at what the data points were for the average, and we tried to smooth out the rebate amount so that it would fall into these categories. And the underlying data does support those breakpoints based on the detailed analysis.
Okay, thank you. I was pretty sure that you guys were on target there, but I just wanted to verify. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Kristen, can you give us a little perspective on how you and other staff members are viewing these two proposals in terms of pros and cons and so on?
Sure. So when we analyzed the tiered program, several benefits presented itself from the perspective of staff. The first benefit is from ease of the businesses being able to complete the form and checking box 1, 2, and 3. An efficient processing reveals itself from this method. Secondly, there were some concerns about the ability of the sales tax revenue amount to be able to be calculated under the straight 50%. And that is a number that is protected, and we take the confidentiality of very seriously. So under the tiered program, a benefit is that specific amount is not able to be calculated. A business falls within one of 3 broad categories. So that confidentiality is more protected under the tiered rebate program. And from the standpoint of the importance of that confidentiality, staff and in consultation with legal counsel support option B.
Peter, can you give us a little sense of the legal context of that?
So the state of Illinois has when many municipalities started offering sales tax rebate agreements, the retailers became concerned that their proprietary information regarding their sales information would become public. And because in order to do rebate agreements, the municipality would have to know which sales were coming from which business. So in order to allow the municipalities to have that information, which the retailers on the one hand wanted, so they could have potential to get a rebate, they reached an agreement with the Department of Revenue that in order for the Department of Revenue to provide that information to the municipalities would have to sign an agreement, a confidentiality agreement that's very strict, and down to, it's not like the village gets that information. It's specifically identified personnel in the village have access to that information. Each of those individuals has to sign a separate form verifying that they're one of the designated individuals. They will keep it confidential. And it's a crime to disclose that information. So that does limit it presents a risk in doing this program, because we're obviously using that information. Once we issue a grant, then somebody can and start doing the math. If we were going to be exactly on the option A, which is 50%. Legally, I've said we could do that because the applicant in the application for option A is going to provide us that information. And the provision in the confidentiality agreement is that we won't provide information that we receive from the Department of Revenue. But if the retailer gives us the information, that's a little different. Nonetheless, it's still treated very confidentially. The retailers are uncomfortable providing that information. So option B does eliminate that whole issue because now you're talking about ranges, and simply identifying which retailer fits within one of those ranges does not implicate the confidentiality issues.
Thank you.
Just a question that I don't expect anyone will have an answer to, but I just, something that might be worth looking into. When we make these payments, I'm wondering about the tax consequences for the recipients and if we can qualify them as disaster relief payments under the Internal Revenue Code. It's like Section 139, so that they won't be taxable. I know we're refunding sales tax receipts, so there may be an issue there. But to the extent we can get as much of this money in their hands and keep it in their hands and not have it ricochet back to some government entity, the better.
Good idea.
Peter, any thoughts on that?
No, it's an excellent point. We can check, and I'm sure the retailers they benefit as well, but we can work with them if it's available.
I think if we classify it as relief due to a federal declared disaster, which coronavirus is, that gives us some standing. The complicating thing, though, is that because it's also a refund of taxes paid, but if we can do it, it'd be great.
Andy, do you see a place to shove a little language in the front page of the ordinance?
I think we would just want to insert in literally, well, actually, I think we have it.
We refer to the disaster proclamation.
We probably want the federal disaster, the president's, which I could give you the site on it, in that same sentence.
Well, I'll tell you what, we can always modify that when we get to potentially making a motion on this. So if you can keep digging.
Yeah.
And if there are any other questions, Kristen, I know we had a lot of late correspondence and maybe some people in the waiting room who are interested in speaking on this. So I think we can move to public comment at this point, and then we can come back and deliberate on the various options.
I'll get some language together.
Thanks, Andy.
So first I'll read the public comment that was provided via email in advance of the meeting. The first public comment states, "Dear President Rintz, please adopt the resolution with the local business sales tax rebate economic relief program application option B, meaning smaller businesses that need the revenue will fare better for survival. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Katie Corey, owner of Scandal." The second comment is from Pam Faulkner at Green Bay Cycles. It says, subject agenda item B, Chris, yes, let's do this. The third comment is from Cynthia Burr at Vivid Art Gallery. Hi, Chris. I just looked over the two proposals and I am strongly in favor of option B. Thank you for your championing of Winnetka small businesses. Best, Cynthia.
Kristen? I'm sorry, I didn't hear who the second email was from. It got, the transmission got a little fuzzy there. Who was the second email from?
Pam Faulkner from Green Bay Cycles.
Oh, thank you. Great. Okay. Thank you.
The next comment is from Carrie Londy. Hello, sir. We are Carrie and Ken Londy, owners of Londo Mondo in both Winnetka and downtown Chicago. We are proponents of option B, and we hope that most small businesses in the area can not only survive, but come out flourishing in the long run. Thank you for your consideration. Best, Carrie and Ken Londy. The next comment is from Meg Carroll. Dear Mr. Rents, I am co-owner of Bedside Manor Limited, and I'm writing to you to offer my support of the proposal to vote to approve a sales tax rebate to Winnetka businesses in order to help with the substantial impact that has occurred from the COVID-19 pandemic. Option B is what we are in favor of. Thank you, Meg Carroll, Bedside Manor. The next comment is from Peggy Swartchild to Chris Rentz and the Winnetka Village Council, support for item B in the Economic Relief Program. Dear President Rentz, I'm in favor and urge you to vote in support of option B of the Local Business Sales Tax Rebate Economic Relief Program. Businesses that are in need of relief would benefit greatly from this tiered program. We must keep as many businesses going as possible in our village. Thank you, and please vote for option B. Peggy Swartchild, owner, material possession. And the next comment is from Randy Lamb. Dear Chris, I support option B for Winnetka businesses as I feel it would be more beneficial for more businesses in Winnetka and Hubbard Woods. Thank you for your time, Randy Lamb, Randoons. That ends the written public comment that was submitted. We also have a couple people in the audience that I'm going to recognize. First, we have first name John. Welcome, John. You're unmuted. Would you like to make a comment on this agenda item? Hearing none. We also have Terry Dason. Terry, welcome. You're unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, trustees and President Rentz for considering this option, these two different options for our businesses. After speaking with many businesses over the last week about the prospect of the council doing something to help them, they were all thrilled. Everyone is in support of having something happen from the village. And I believe option B is the best solution for our businesses because I think we'll reach more businesses this way. And our smaller businesses are the ones that are crucially important to this community to be able to keep it.
Can somebody mute?
Our small businesses are crucially important to keeping this community and keeping our downtown thriving because we have quite a few of them. And we don't want to overlook the importance of every business in this town. So thank you for your consideration for option B.
Thanks, Terry.
Okay, and then now I'm recognizing Teresa. Teresa, you're unmuted. Would you like to make a comment on this item?
No, thank you.
And that concludes the public comment.
Okay. Back to you guys. Conversation, debate, interest any one way or another, option A, option B. Clearly the business community is weighed in on this. Go ahead, Penny.
It sounds to me like it sounds to me like both from the standpoint of the village in terms of administration and the responsibility that we have towards confidentiality, as well as the interests of the business community, it sounds like option B is the way to go. And I would support what staff has developed with the changes about making the change to the application form as John suggested, and then the issue about the disaster relief that Andy brought up, so it would hopefully not be taxable. So I'd say let's go.
Great. Jump in. Who's next?
I concur with Penny. Let's get this done.
Say what, Rob? I missed you. Hello?
Which Robert? I wasn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was you. I'm sorry. Any thoughts while I have your attention?
Yeah, no, I'm 100% for it. I kind of wavered back after giving this a lot of thought, and privacy and the village's ability to execute. I think I'm now leaning more toward option B as well.
Okay. Bob, Andy, either of you two?
I agree. I agree. Option B. I think we should move forward.
Okay.
And Peter and I have found some language to add. I'll just read it so you all know. What we would do is after the second whereas paragraph, where it refers to J.B. Pritzker's declaration, we would add two more whereas paragraphs. First one, and Peter already has this language, is whereas on March 13, 2020, the president declared a nationwide emergency pursuant to Section 501B of the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, 42 U.S.C. 5121-5207, the Stafford Act, covering all states and territories, including Illinois, and then the next paragraph that we would add is, whereas on March 26, 2020, the president declared a major disaster in Illinois pursuant to Section 401 of the Stafford Act. So those would be the two things that we would add. No guarantees that that's going to give you tax exempt status on these payments, but the idea is that under the Internal Revenue Code, Section 139, that these might be considered qualified disaster relief payments that wouldn't be subject to income tax. But again, people can't double dip, and so I'm not giving anyone tax advice, and I'm not even all that certain that this will get you there. But I think adding this makes it more likely than if we didn't.
I wonder if we even have to call this. I get why we're calling it a rebate, but the bottom line is, this wasn't our coffers of the village, and maybe we don't call it a rebate. I mean, and I know why we're doing that, but maybe we don't. This is technically we're giving money back, which is great to the shop owners, but maybe there's a way we can structure what we call this anyway.
I think we're okay in terms of what we call it. The IRS is more concerned about substance than language and wanting to know what's behind it. And Peter already had really thorough language in there about it's for the general welfare. It's language that you would actually want for that Section 131. So I think I'm okay with that. It's just referencing the federal disaster relief is the basis for claiming exempt status under 139.
Got it.
And I like option B.
Okay. So, well, it sounds like we have consensus around option B. So, not to beat a dead horse, we got some meaty stuff behind here. So, would anybody be interested in making a motion on this, please?
I'd make a motion to adopt this ordinance with the edits that Andy and Peter have recommended as presented.
And that would be for option B?
For option B, correct.
We want to modify the 2009 taxable sales in the application.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Second that motion.
You okay there, Peter?
He's on mute.
This is the first time this is before you, so the question is whether you want to waive introduction unanimously and then move to adopt.
Definitely.
Incorporating those changes.
Well, Chris, I don't know how to adjust my motion, but I would do that. I would waive introduction and go to adoption.
Okay. Penny, I can't see. So could you let me know how you feel about waiving here?
Yeah, I think we need to get this going. So that
Okay,
sounds
show of hands from everybody else. Okay, we have unanimity. Okay, do I have a motion to waive introduction of ordinance number M13-2020?
That was Trustee Dearborn, second by Trustee Kripe.
No, this is Rob. We the original option. So now we're going to the waiving before we actually bring up the adoption.
Okay, we have the motion by Trustee Dearborn,
Okay,
And you need a second.
Second.
all right, roll call vote.
Trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
trustee Kreip,
Yes.
trustee Swerk,
Yes.
trustee Caladarchi,
Yes.
trustee Lampier,
Yes.
trustee Apatow.
Yes.
The motion carries. Okay, now may I have a motion to adopt ordinance number M13, 2020, amended to reflect the federal disaster proclamations and modifying the language to indicate that the revenue is based on actual sales tax generating revenue, not total revenue.
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
Got it? Okay. Roll call vote.
Trustee Caladarchi,
Yes.
trustee Kreip,
Yes.
trustee Swerk,
Yes.
trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
trustee Apatow, trustee Lampier.
Yes.
Carries, thank you.
Good job, Kristen and Rob. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Anybody who says we're stuck in the mud and can't move quickly isn't paying attention. We talked about this to all of us for the first time last Tuesday, and moving this into action in 7 days, I think is a pretty solid turnaround. So with that, we'll move forward. Item B is resolution number R54 2020, approving the termination and release of a restricted covenant at 1171 Ash Street. In July, we approved a plat of subdivision for 1165, 1171, and 1177 Ash to re-subdivide 3 lots into two. At that point, we thought we were done with it, but the subject resolution would release an old and obsolete restrictive covenant so the applicants can complete the land transaction. And our Director of Community Development, David Schoen, is here to review.
Yes, good evening. Just quickly, the applicants are requesting the release of a stormwater restrictive covenant on 1171 Ash Street. That's the existing lot that's vacant. At the time in 1998, when a 2-lot subdivision was created that created 1171 Ash and 1177 Ash, the village put a restrictive covenant on the property that basically was the stormwater requirements at that time. Since the village's current stormwater requirements are more restrictive than that 1998 standard, the covenant no longer serves any purpose, and Steve Saunders, the Public Works Director, finds it appropriate to release the covenant. And that's all I have on it.
All right, guys, any questions for David? John, I can't believe you're not going to jump in on this.
No, because the changes are more restrictive with current standards, and that's what Steve Saunders' overview. I have no issue with this.
Any other questions for David?
Nope.
So
That's a good one. All right. Kristen, is there anybody in the audience who is requested to speak on this item?
We do have the applicant and their attorney in the audience, so I will unmute them. Welcome, Todd.
Welcome. Thank you very much. I think this really speaks for itself, so I have no further comment.
That was very wise, Todd.
I'm learning.
And Laura and Richard Radcliffe are in the audience. I've unmuted you. Would you like to make a comment?
We think this speaks for itself, so we have no comment.
Thanks.
That is an ideal client.
And Carl and Rebecca, I'm unmuting you now. Would you like to make a comment?
Nope, no comment.
No comment.
Okay, that concludes the members of the audience here to speak on that item.
Wonderful. All right, well, seeing no other questions or comments, I'll just ask for a motion to adopt 5420.
So moved?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Lampier,
Yes.
trustee Apatow,
Yes.
trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
trustee Caladarchi. Sorry, trustee Caladarchi,
Yes.
trustee Kripe,
Yes.
trustee Swerk.
That motion carries. Thank you very much. And good luck again, folks. All right, we move on to item 10, old business. This is resolution number R47-2020. Amendment to development agreement and restrictive covenants on 630 Pine Lane. This matter was discussed and tabled in July to give the applicants time to submit a site plan and discuss the proposal with their neighbors. Tonight, council will consider the request in light of the supplemental materials submitted to the neighbor meeting results. And David, is it David or is Brian taking this one?
Brian will be leading you with this item.
Awesome. Okay. All right, Brian, where do you go?
I promoted Brian. Brian, just share your video, please.
Yeah. I thought that was his pajamas.
And Brian, the presenter privileges.
Move fast. Hopefully sharing my screen here, hopefully. At the July 21st Village Council meeting, Council heard a presentation from me, as well as a review of the request by the owners of 630 Pine Lane, requesting certain amendments to zoning restrictive covenants for the subject property at 630 Pine Lane. That property is shown on your screen there, highlighted. To summarize very briefly the nature of the restrictive covenants, in 2013, in consideration of a request by the owners at that time to demolish the existing residence on the subject property, the council at that time imposed restrictive covenants on the property to increase required setbacks, as well as to lower the permitted size of the structure on the subject property at 630 Pine Lane to be similar to an existing structure that had been demolished. The current request in front of the Village Council, that was the conversation which began on July 21st, is a request to reduce some but not all of those restrictive covenants that had been imposed in 2013, to either go back to standard zoning requirements or to go closer to those standard zoning requirements. Since I went through that in some detail at the previous meeting, I won't go through each standard, but the 5 zoning requests that have been requested by the property owner are listed on the screen there, items number 1 through 5. During the previous council meeting, the council received public comment from 5 neighboring property owners expressing certain various concerns about the request that was in front of the council. The council continued the matter at that meeting, taking no action, and instead, as the village president noted, asked that the applicants come back to the village council with a site plan showing the planned new house, as well as for the applicants and prospective purchasers to conduct an outreach effort to those neighbors who had expressed concerns and to report back to the village council. Included in your agenda packet, in page 79 of the council packet, is a site plan that's been prepared by the purchasers Adam and Samantha Weinberg, depicting a proposed new residence on the subject property, measuring approximately 4,500 to 5,500 square feet. This plan was circulated to the neighbors who had submitted comments to the council in order to better illustrate the plans that they had for the lot, as well as to solicit additional feedback from those neighbors. Attachment B in your agenda packet, beginning on page 90, summarizes the outreach effort to the neighbors that was conducted by Adam and Samantha Weinberg. Emails that were received by them from the neighbors are also included in your agenda packet, beginning on page 95 through page 101 of the material. These various comments express some remaining concerns about the project, and the applicants will certainly want to walk through their conversations that they've had with each of the neighbors. So I'll let them summarize that dialogue that they had. We did receive additional written public comment following the posting of the agenda materials. Those additional comments have been emailed out to the village council as well. And I would be happy at this time to answer any questions that the council may have.
Okay. Can you give us your screen, Brian?
I'm sorry?
Could you give us back our screen so we can see each other?
Or if you don't mind, maybe put up the proposed site plan.
Can do that.
And can you go full screen so there's not a lot of black around it? No big deal. Perfect. Awesome. So it looks like this, that the proposed house footprint fits within the existing setbacks, the actual house. Is that correct, Brian?
That's correct. The house that they're showing in the darker gray shaded area does fit within the existing restrictive covenants.
Great.
The structures that they're showing that would be essentially benefiting from the reductions that have been requested are identified as a potential playhouse on the west side and then a potential greenhouse on the east side.
So would it be possible to not change the covenants of the original property, but to provide specific language to approve the playhouse and the greenhouse footprint where they're shown, so that we don't have the entire site being loosened on setbacks? Is that a possibility?
There is certainly some room for modification of the resolution and the restrictive covenants to more finely tune those changes. Right now, the way the restrictive covenants are written, it simply states that there is a 79-foot setback period from the easterly property line. So it could be modified in any way the council wishes to kind of customize that modification if it chooses to do so.
And currently, like though the playhouse and the greenhouse would be an accessory structure, would it not?
That's correct. Yeah, those are.
And under normal zoning ordinance, would that be something that could be in a setback?
Ordinarily, an accessory structure would be permitted to encroach within a required rear yard area. Wouldn't be permitted within a required front yard setback under standard zoning.
Right. Yeah, I would like to see something done that allows only for those accessory buildings outside of the footprint, just so that somewhere down the road, someone doesn't want to tear down this house and build the much bigger setback property.
Hey, John, let's hold on the deliberations until we do the question.
Good. That was great questions. Thank you.
Good. Other questions for Brian?
Brian, just to be clear here, the request here is coming from the current owners of the property, not the Weinbergs, correct?
Well, yes and no. The request is formally being is made by the owners of the property. They're the ones who have the authority to make these requested changes. They are, however, asking for them with the specific purchasers, Adam and Samantha Weinberg, in mind. And the nature of those requested modifications are specifically to permit the structure that the Weinbergs have contemplated building. So it's kind of a combination of both.
Is that correct? I mean, I guess I'm going back to John's question here, or his thoughts on this. Whatever is approved or not approved, if something's approved tonight, it would extend beyond whether or not the Weinbergs end up purchasing the property. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, because the restrictive covenant would be amended and that's recorded against the property, and that goes to whoever owns it.
Right. So anything that goes beyond what the Weinbergs need, and I know they want to speak to this, if we approve that, it would, and they ended up not purchasing the property, it would be in place for future, owners.
That's correct.
Okay.
Peter,
actually,
it's a great question. I wanted to ask Peter, could it be, I mean, if there were some relief given, could it be conditional?
So let me just actually retract one thing I just said. So the current amendment that's in your packet to the restrictive covenant specifically allows the transfer of the property, acknowledges that Mr. and Mrs. Adam J. Weinberg will be purchasing the property, and they are deemed to be permitted transferees. So there is a provision in the covenant that that there's got to be some village approval when it transfers. That's why we included that language. So it is specific, at least as it's written now, it is specific to these purchasers. Chris, to your question, the exhibit to the proposed amendment sets forth very specifically, Exhibit A, the restrictive covenant against Lot 2. It sets forth very specifically the side yards, the building height, etc. Those would be definitely tweaked. It would have to be agreed to by the village and the current property owner.
Well, I guess I just had a really bad flashback, Peter, on the transferee option. but I guess I'm looking for that protection, right? Where does that give the village protection in the event that, and I'm not casting any dispersions on either Suzanne or the Weinbergs, but in the event that this was we've had some pretty bumpy road here on this property. If I guess what we'd all be concerned about is a flip, with the Weinbergs not actually staying here and building their dream home.
Yeah, we've had a few of those.
Peter, can it be contingent?
It could definitely be contingent. It could be contingent on a building permit application. I mean, it could be contingent on whatever we want it to be contingent on.
Which one's going to be the board?
I'm sorry?
I guess, the question is that just creates, I mean, a contingency is a pretty rock solid option. Is that correct, Peter? For whatever we may or may not do, right?
Correct. I mean, again, whatever you decide, the property owner is going to have to sign the amendment to the restrictive covenant as well, and it'll have to be recorded against the property.
I understand. Any other questions?
So-
Yeah, oh, who's up? Somebody else?
That was me. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The question I had is relative to the roof lot coverage and why the request is so much higher than the current roof lot coverage, because it looks like the footprint is smaller. So if you can explain, run that through that again for me.
Penny, we'll bring the applicant forward to make their
Okay.
case. We get, Brian, do you have any answer for that, or is that something we'll look to the applicant for?
I'm afraid I don't have any particularly insightful way to answer that question.
All right.
Great. And just one other thing for the record, it's not a big deal, but on page 3 of this particular element, our agenda packet, page 80, for standard number 4, it should be total impermeable surface area. On line 2, we accidentally, there's roof lot coverage in there. So I just want to make sure that our standards are correct.
Oh, I see that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great, good, okay.
Other questions for Brian? Oh, Jay, you were going to jump in there.
Just to Peter, just a question. So there's already a restrictive covenant on the property. Part of the concern seems to be that the current purchasers may not follow through or could flip the property. Is it possible to have a restrictive covenant, or I'm sorry, to allow them the relief that they seek, but if they sell the property or don't develop or don't do something, the restriction goes back on?
I think what the existing proposed amendment does is it does tie the amendment to Mr. and Mrs. Adam J. Weinberg. So they are deemed under this to be permitted transferees for purposes of the agreement. And only permitted transferees are allowed. So if your question is there a way to tie it so that only they would be able to take advantage of it and they couldn't flip it, then I think the language that we have should accomplish that, at least with regard to that issue.
What happens in the circumstance where they come in, buy the house, develop their property, do what they want, live here for 15 years, and then go to sell the property? Would the old restrictive covenant kick back into place once they sell, even if it's after a certain number of years?
No, the restricted covenant will be amended. That's what is attached to your packet tonight. So it'll be amended and it'll run with the property. With whatever changes we make to the restrictions that you approve and that the property owner approves. And unless that is amended again, that is what will govern the property.
Yeah, no, I guess my question is are we able to have the amendment run just with these owners for as long as they own the property in order to protect against the flipping idea?
It could run with just the owners, but I'm just thinking that neglects the protection to the village. I think you wouldn't want it to, because they're going to build their house, right? Presumably. And if they sell it, you wouldn't want these old restrictions to come back, because then you'd have non-complying issues. We'd be back to today.
I just have a couple of questions. Am I mistaken? Is the only issue here the greenhouse and the playhouse?
No, there are other issues relative to the increases in the roof lot coverage and impermeable surface as well.
You know, Andy, maybe I should bring the applicants up now. Do you think that'd
Yeah.
be good?
Yeah, I just want a clarification, maybe Brian, from your memo. It says, as shown, the proposed home appears to fall within the existing covenant setback requirements. However, two potential accessory structures would not. So is it also what Penny was saying? It's the roof coverage?
The roof coverage that they're asking to have increased, it's not obvious that this house, as shown in the site plan, would require any additional roof lot coverage area. The impermeable surfaces are not really rendered in any way, so it's really impossible to opine whether they need the relief for this plan on the impermeable area. But I think it probably has as much to do with the future saleability or future improvements that might be considered for the lot.
So
the applicants might be able to answer.
The only thing we know for sure, though, is that the playhouse and the greenhouse would be non-conforming, and we would need some kind of thing to cover that, right?
That's with respect to, certainly with respect to setbacks. It's not clear that they would need roof lot coverage increases for those two structures, though.
Okay.
One more question.
Just a question to consider, and then I would like to hear from the applicants and whoever else. Peter, couldn't we just exempt or carve out the playhouse and the greenhouse from the just release the restricted covenants as to those two existing structures, but leave everything else as is? Because it does seem like we're struggling a little bit with, we have a gray blob on a piece of paper, and no one knows quite what that is.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, so maybe we can get a little bit more information from the applicants, but I just wanted to understand if that's what we're really dealing with.
Gotcha. John, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, just one more quick question. I know at the last meeting we had, we kind of gave the applicant direction to give us a site plan. That would obviously help in seeing what driveways or parking areas they have. Have they submitted a site plan, Brian?
The plan that's on the screen currently is their site plan that we've marked up a bit to show the setbacks and to call out certain structures.
Okay.
And the trees. Thank you for doing the trees as well.
Yeah, that helps. Rob?
No, I think that's right. And I know, from what I've seen in dealing with everyone here, that they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to be reasonable on this, but I understand the other concerns. And I think this will be, we'll have to hear from them, but I think they are saying in the future, in 20 years, will this diminish their, if we leave restricted covenants, will this diminish the resale? And I think that's what we need to hear from them to really understand why that would be, or how that would work, or why we would leave it.
Okay. Well, Kristen, why don't you bring up all the Weinbergs and their attorney, and if Suzanne wants to come up too, that's fine. Bring them all on. And Brian, if you could give us back our screen for the time being, that would be great. Thank you. Hi, Todd.
Hello. Want me to start? Do we have Adam, Samantha, are you here?
We're here.
We're coming.
Okay, well, first off, thank you very much for
Hi.
bearing with us on this long, tedious. I think if you look at the site plan, you'll see that they worked with the village arborist, and they're really trying to build around all these trees. It's super important to my clients. That and staying out of the neighbor's sight lines. With that, I mean, they're looking at building a 5,000 square foot house, and under the current development agreement, they could go 9,200 square feet. So we're really being pretty modest. The setbacks to the east and west are just for a potential greenhouse and a playhouse in the future. With the lower the roof lot coverage, I think we give back a little bit on that. That was an issue. Do you have any questions, AJ or Samantha?
I guess there were a couple of notes I was taking as we were going on there. One of the important pieces you guys were mentioning was the impermeable surface area, which yes, we were looking for that to be raised because the lot being the shape that it is, and that flag shape, that the impermeable surface goes all the way down to Pine Lane, quite a ways. I don't remember the exact number, but it took up a large chunk of that impermeable surface allowance. So as you start making a driveway all the way to the house, which again is now towards the back of the lot, furthest from pretty much as many neighbors as we can get, that takes up a large portion of that impermeable surface. So it has nothing to do with the structure of the house itself.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I'm sorry. And can you discuss the roof lot coverage a little bit as well?
Being honest, the roof lot coverage is not a large consideration for us. It was to bring it up somewhat to the standard, but the total roof lot coverage is not of major concern to us.
Yeah, we would be willing to
Bring that somewhere
go
between.
down with that. As long as our current structure would be, we plan on building that current structure. So as long as it would be covered for that current structure that's shown there.
And for those of you worried about the purchase of the structure, we actually do have a close scheduled for tomorrow, assuming that this all goes. So hopefully we can, so we are planning on buying this thing.
Well, thank you, particularly about the impermeable surface. That explanation makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Super.
Andy, I know you had some things you were raising. You want to drill down on those now?
Yeah, I was just trying to understand what relief is actually needed. And the only thing that seemed clear was the greenhouse and the playhouse. Is there something else?
So as the plans were developed, we hired an architect in April-ish. And he had originally placed the current house in the setbacks just to be, safe, and assuming that that's the way to go. The truth is we're trying to stay within that structure. The only place we would go is within a small chunk towards that tank, which we can only go maybe 3 or 4 feet, but probably not even that. However, the reason for the expansion of the setbacks is really for the value of the property. We just feel that, if we're going to make an investment in about an acre-sized lot, that we should be able to use somewhat of that amount and its value to that end. It's a large purchase for us, and we want to get the most out of it that we can.
We currently can't see any village council members.
You're not missing much.
to make sure you're still there.
You hang up on us?
This is for radio, not TV.
I'm afraid that I will lose all power if I have a video, so that's why I'm invisible.
The rest of you, though, I don't know.
Here, we can see you.
All right, good.
So, other questions for the applicants? John, did you have anything? Go ahead.
I do. Again, same as last time. You keep mentioning like you've worked with an architect and you've got a site plan, and we have the trees now shown, but showing the trees, but without knowing where your driveway is or any parking areas or your garage driveway, doesn't help us assess what we're looking at.
I can point it out if somebody has the cursor over the site plan if you'd like.
Okay, and I
The
guess,
thing is that we don't really have that yet.
We're kind of waiting for this to see where we can go with that. The idea would be that we take the driveway either to the front of the house, which is that canted wall, as our architect keeps, the angled wall. That's where the front door is, and then spreading either east to the end of the house, or it will split off completely and go to the western edge, no, the eastern edge, and then cut back into the garage, depending
And-
on where we can go.
The garage would be in the structure as far east on the map, so near the tank.
2 cars.
yeah, I think just so that, sure this also, what you're showing us, and if we revise the covenants, you're not bound by building what you're showing us today. You're bound to building within the setbacks of what we end up approving.
Yes.
I'm not saying you might double the size of the house or have half the thing paved and who knows what, but it would be a lot easier having a site plan to help analyze this thing to make sense. Like you're presenting to us on the picture today, that your house is going to fit within the existing setbacks. But a couple minutes ago, you mentioned that, well, we need to go a few feet over. Those are things that we really need to know to finalize this.
But we kind of need to before we plan it with the architect.
Yeah.
Well, I saw-
We
worried
give
about-
them $200.
I think I saw some correspondence maybe with some of the neighbors. And tell me if I'm wrong, I think I saw something in there that says you had a large amount of money spent with an architect, but we have not seen that. And that would maybe be beneficial if you wanted to share that with us.
We were encouraged not to share that
Okay, well,
by the
Your
village.
okay. Well, again, you're not restricted to it, but if your house fits in the existing footprint, I would like to just somehow get the approvals for the future greenhouse and for the play area to get those approvals to be outside of the setbacks or within the setbacks.
I mean, Todd is
And that would be very easy.
the idea of some sort of sunset clause going into the agreement that, the plan sticks to what we plan to build until, X number of years, whether it be 3, 5, whatever it is. Again, there is some play we'd like to have the option of having to that storage tank at the current time, but in terms of the auxiliary structures, those are proposed in the idea that that's a spot they could go, not that that's the spot they're going to go.
Yeah, so I really would prefer to see more of a solid site plan or more of a setback requirement rather than going as far out to the playhouse and as far out of the greenhouse and say, hey, I want the whole box rectangle as my building area. It just seems very excessive.
We agreed that we can build in the site plan that's on what's in front of the council now. But we would like the opportunity to build the greenhouse and the playhouse in the future in the new setbacks, just for those. We discussed earlier that we could limit the variance just to these accessory structures and not this principal residence. So I think
that makes sense.
And that's what we were talking about. I think we can do that. We can build with the footprint that's in front of us tonight. If we just get approval to build the dollhouse and the greenhouse in the expanded variances to the east and west.
Yeah, your building setbacks are in the existing covenant. The only change would be to allow the playhouse and the greenhouse.
Yes, that's
Right.
correct. And we can do that. I mean, this house is so modest for the lot that the neighbors should actually be thrilled, because any other builder would likely max it out up to the 9,200 square feet.
And that makes sense to me. I tend to agree with that. That's why I don't want to increase the buildable setbacks
For the primary
for
structure.
20,000 square feet or some number.
Yeah,
right?
no, and we can agree to that. If we can put in the language just strictly for accessory structures.
And Todd, the ability to expand to the tank.
Oh, well, how many feet are we talking to the tank? Do you have that? Can you put that back up, Brian? The drawing? Please. Okay. So how many feet is that, AJ? Do you know?
It's roughly 4 or 5, and you can only go about 2 or 3.
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty negligible. If you're talking about 2 or 3 feet, you're talking about, your architect says it might move the whole structure 2 or 3 feet east.
It would be an expanded 2 feet square foot.
The garage is just a little tight right now, so that's the only thing that we're looking to potentially
Literally
add.
garage.
The garage is just only room for our cars and not room for any bicycles, or it's very tight for any sort of.
Well, could we write this up that the principal structure, we get a 2-foot variance to the east on that, and then the accessory structures up into the current building code?
Can I ask why you would need to go 2 or 3 feet to the east? I mean, aside from the fact maybe the architect likes the design, I mean, you got all this room to the north. Is there some issue there in terms of building in that space?
That's where the garage is.
That's where the
Yep, the garage is short on that side, so that's the only thing we're looking to add, because the garage opens to the east.
At the moment.
Opens to the east. Okay.
Yeah, and so therefore, like, if we were to add a foot or 2, just have a little bit more wiggle room in the garage.
And we can't expand the house at all and restructure it because of those fees shown. So if we reoriented it and moved it a little bit, we can't go. It's the design of the house. We can't orient it towards the north.
So you're working around those 2 trees, basically, that's kind of driving the placement?
Exactly.
Okay.
That was our biggest consideration.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I mean, that helps me if there's a, versus kind of the unlimited set, going the snapback. If somebody has a reasonable, they're and trying to be reasonable and needs 2 or 3 feet, I'm less hung up on that than I am with kind of the broader view. I think, and looking at the letters and talking to neighbors, I think they'd be less, if it's a 2 or 3 foot ask.
Well, no, the ask is the main structure to 2 or 3 feet, but we are really looking for the setbacks for the value of the land.
Yeah, I don't think Todd relayed what I think that we're not on the same page here, because I believe that we are asking for the setbacks to be relieved.
I'd like to point out.
Can you explain it to us just a little bit? What you mean?
Yes, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so as a young family, this is an enormous purchase for us. And we're spending a lot of money on this lot, and it's something that we look at as we need to have the value of the land for what it's worth. And if we're spending what we're spending on it, we don't feel like the value is there if it doesn't have the value when we go in 20 years to sell it. We don't feel right about buying a property that's extremely diminished, because we had nothing to do with the CBI subdivision. We had nothing to do with anything. So when we look at buying a lot in Winnetka, which we'd love to live, we want to have the same fair value that the other neighbors have.
And can you talk me through that a little bit? What is it about the way the subdivision happened? I'm just asking because I just don't understand the history of it. What is it about the way these 2 lots have come together? Is it you're ending up with smaller setbacks than you otherwise would? Can you explain that to me?
Initial setbacks were put in place as a restriction to the old builder to basically, as you can see, the layout of the old house on that plan, it was to make it so they tore down a landmark house and they were told they now have to rebuild the same house in that in that area.
And the developers were criminals and one may be in prison. Suzanne can probably speak more to that because she got dumped with this, but it's really was to punish the people involved initially, and we weren't those people. And so we really feel like I mean, we can only try. We're trying to find
What's fair.
what's fair to us as the buyer. And we fully intend to build the house that's laid out there. We don't intend to flip it. We have 2 little girls and we couldn't be more excited to live in Winnetka. It has nothing to do about making money. And of course I come and say all those things, but if you knew me well, I'm from New England and I am like itching out of my skin to get out of here. And we just really want to make sure we're spending the right amount of money for what the property is worth.
So and I don't want to go down a tangent too much, but so maybe Brian or someone can give you the history. Did someone tear down a house they weren't supposed to tear down? Is that what happened?
That is exactly what happened. There was a landmark. Go ahead, Brian, if you want to fill them in.
Yeah, well, I can give you the condensed version of the history of this subdivision, Trustee Kripe. The original 3-lot subdivision that was approved by the village council was somewhat heavily predicated on the preservation and restoration of the then existing residence at 630 Pine Lane, which is shown in the kind of the lighter shaded outline within the buildable area. That subdivision was approved in 2007, and then in conjunction with that approval, there was a new residence built on the lot to the immediate east at 624 Pine Lane. And that was kind of the end of all real construction activity, but for the construction of the public improvements. So for example, the stormwater vault that's on this lot was constructed. The conveyance structures to take that stormwater west to Hibbard have all been constructed, and it was all predicated on that original 1922 structure at 630 Pine Lane being saved. It was landmarked, and plans for an addition were approved by the Landmark Preservation Commission and the Village Council, and that also was part of the subdivision approval. It wasn't until 2013 that the owners of the property, Mr. and Mrs. Murphy, came to the village and explained that the cost of renovation of that house had become economically unviable. And it was at that point that the village council did approve the demolition of that existing residence, but then imposed these setback restrictive covenants with the idea being that because to some degree the neighbors had all kind of spoken in with concern about the 3-lot subdivision, they were at least, I think at some point the neighbors felt that they were benefiting from the preservation of that existing structure, and the restrictive covenants put in place to have the new house on the subject property at least be of a size and scale, if not look like the original 630 Pine Lane residence. It would at least have a size similar to what was there. So that's kind of the thinking behind the restrictive covenants in a nutshell.
Hey, Brian, can I just interject here for 1 second about the tear down of that property? I'm sure most of you know the whole history with CBI, that Tom and I were silent investors in that property. And in the course of this, we knew they had subdivided the lots into 3 pieces, and the intention was always to renovate that existing piece of property. In the meantime, the Marlows, I guess, I don't know, and I can't say it was intentional. I suspect it was. They allowed that house to get destroyed by, I don't know what happened, but there was some storm. water got in the house. They never checked on it. We ended up with major mold issues. The house was like falling apart. And that's where, when we started looking into the renovation, it became unfeasible and just so outrageous. I just didn't want people to think we took tearing that house down lightly, because we certainly didn't. And again, our hands were tied with, they're out of the picture now, and we are now stuck with an investment which seemed like a solid investment in 2007. We are now still trying to dig ourselves out of this hole, and these setbacks had the feedback we had gotten from people over the years looking at this were these setbacks were of a concern, because as people looked at it, they felt they didn't align with the neighbors. That was why we requested these setbacks. When Sam and AJ came in and put this bid in, and the bid was put in 1 year ago, so we have been working with them for 1 whole year now to help develop this property. And they have been they've been so respectful to the site. And one of the things that drew them to the site was the wooded plot, the wooded lot, how beautiful the property was. And they're not doing your typical mega mansion that years ago were the big thing. They're trying to build a reasonable family size home. And, that's all I want to say. I just didn't want the council to think that we just went in and tore a house down for the sake of somebody else being able to come in and build something crazy. We did it out of a financial necessity. The end. But I think, the reason I've been letting Sam and AJ speak, I think their passion for what they want to build is better than me telling you my story. I really think that this young couple has the best interests at heart for this property. I've never gotten the impression once that this is something that they were going to try to flip. They have always been passionate about what they were going to build. From the beginning conversations with them, they never made it sound like it was going to be anything except what you're seeing tonight, a reasonable family home.
So Brian, if we didn't have this whole history with this house, what would normal setbacks look like for this property? Would it align with what they're asking for?
Normal setbacks from the east align with what they're looking for. If the solid red line is drawn at a 50-foot distance from the east property line, the rear yard to the west is aligned with the standard zoning requirements of 25-foot rear yard. The standard side yard requirements would be substantially closer to the north and south property lines. The side yard, minimum side yard setback of 12 feet could be observed from one of the two side yards, either to the north or to the south. So the side yards are essentially what was kind of, I think, probably given the most weight in terms of the restrictive covenants from 2013, because it was the neighbors to the north and south, I think, who probably felt that the preservation of the existing residents was important. Certainly Mr. Block, who used to live to the north, was very active in those discussions with the council at the time.
Well, and can I make a comment, Brian?
Yes.
So a big consideration for not asking for the changes on the north and the south were to consider the neighbors. We absolutely knew that that was something that should be left alone, and that's why we only asked for the east and west to be changed.
Also, as Brian just mentioned, Mr. Black has since sold his property in the last week to a new couple that's relatively around our age, and they're great.
And they're fully in support of our project.
So that was positive for us.
Yeah.
It's on our kids' age.
Yeah.
Brian, can I ask a question, Brian? Just to make sure we all understand this, there were three lots that came out of this development project.
Yes.
The one on the west, which borders Hibbard, the one in the middle, that's the topic conversation, and then the one to the east that's owned by the Hineses, and they put in they wrote a letter, but they bought that property of theirs to the east, my understanding, with these covenants in place.
When the Hines purchased their property and constructed their new home on the lot to the east, the restrictive covenants for the setbacks were not in place, but in fact, it was somewhat, I guess you could argue, more restrictive because the village was under the expectation and the development agreement stated that the existing residence would be preserved and added on to.
Okay, so what would the reasonable assumption of the Hineses have been in terms of that setback on this property when they bought their home?
The setback for the existing residence plus the approved addition to that residence was precisely the plan that was used to come up with the restrictive covenants that are now in place. So you might wonder why there is a restrictive covenant of 77.91 feet. That's a rather precise number. That setback requirement comes from the site plan for the renovation to the 630 Pine Lane residence.
And the request here is for a 25-foot setback? East?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
What's the request for the setback to the east?
50.
The request is to lower the 77.91 feet to 50 feet.
To 50 feet, okay.
Standard.
And the Hines they've sent an email in that's part of the record here that said the Weinbergs they had a good conversation, so on and so forth, and they're fine with the greenhouse, I think it is, but they do object to a change for any zoning variance that would allow an ultimately a home to be built beyond the current setback provision. I think that's, to me, that's the east side is the key issue. I understand the north and the south. The west, there's nothing there, but the east it seems to be the crux of the problem here.
Hines property is also, even if we built all the way to that new proposed setback, is still the furthest house from this build. The property, the Block property to the north and Fedorenchik property to the south are still in the Hines property, the actual house itself.
But also with that in mind, with that existing stormwater vault, we can't build that way. So we are asking for those changes, but we cannot go that way.
Why ask for the changes?
For the value of the
land.
But if they can't build that way, it's kind of the chicken and the egg. If you can't build that way, why would we?
Well, say someone wanted to make a detached garage in 40 years and they wanted to put it in the northeast corner. They could put it there. I'm not saying that's something we would ever do, but who knows? I don't know. It's something that's unforeseeable what someone else might want to do when we sell our property. But it gives them the flexibility that they could do something.
Okay.
And
but if you're the owner of that property, I can understand their concern. Yeah.
What municipal or village interest is being met or being answered by having these restrictive covenants in place on this land?
well, it is, it was put in place and I mean, the expectation for development was based on a set of principles. And I would think the value of the property currently reflects that. Unless there is a specific reason, I can see from the perspective of the neighbors, unless there's a specific reason to change it, why would it be changed? That was the imposition that was put by the council on the land. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I think
why are they still here?
Pardon me?
What do we accomplish by having these restrictive covenants in place? And I guess my reasoning goes like this. I bought my house in 2005, and the house just east of me was on a double wide lot. It was a little tiny house built in 1910. It was beautiful. I had this gorgeous view to the east. And part of why I liked the house I moved into, other than the fact I could afford it, was that there was a small house next to me. Well, about a year later, that house got torn down and a big house was put up next to me. It blocked my view to the east. It blocked the lake breezes that used to come into the house here. It's noisy. It has a barking dog, which council has heard at some point. So
that's just one dog?
That's actually two. So my expectations of what I was buying were significantly changed by what
the
developer next to me did. And I had no restrictive covenants protecting me. So I guess I'm getting back to the question of what are we still what are we still serving, or what purpose are we still accomplishing for the village?
Well, relative to this particular piece of property, that your next door neighbor was well within their existing rights to have that house built, given the current zoning regulations and the way whatever restrictions of that property stood. I'm presuming it was built within, what is already on the books, that the property owners in the area, understanding what the zoning was on this particular piece of property, base their value assessments on what the zoning was. Again, I'm just pointing out the differences between those two cases. I think there is a difference. I don't know necessarily how strong, as you point out, the municipal interest is. I do have sympathy with the homeowners because the value of their property is in part reflected by what the zoning was on their neighboring piece of property. So I can't understand that particular concern. That being said, I can also see the point of making some changes, moving a bit. I think the eastern profile as is presented here towards the Heinz's is actually much smaller than what the house had been before. Again, I mean, the 7,000 square feet in terms of roof lot coverage would be a much bigger footprint. And that I can see where is being concerned. I think there's a little bit of confusion on the part of the neighbors in terms of roof lot coverage versus FAR. That's worth pointing out and discussing. I think those are two components that we probably ought to talk about, as well as the setbacks. But, I can see the point, given the size of the lot, of altering what the permitted area for the house's footprint could be. I think that there is a value in that.
Yeah, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Cook County assessor knows what restrictive covenants are on a lot when they do their calculations and tax the bejesus out of you on it.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't.
I mean,
Because
my thought is
taxes does not reflect that.
Yeah.
My thought is that the houses in the area of a similar size, in a similar condition, have no restrictive covenants on them. And again, while I understand the idea, I don't have sympathy for the purchasers now, because they're buying land with restrictive covenants on it, and it's subject to village council either modifying, removing, whatever. So them saying we want to protect our investment, or we want to make it worth it, I'm like, that's the chance you take when you buy land with a restrictive covenant. So that doesn't drive my question. My question or my problem goes back to this piece of land is encumbered with this restrictive covenant, and their neighbors aren't. So a neighbor with a similar lot and a similar house could knock down their house and build a giant house or do whatever they want. And the question is, why are we still involved with this in a restrictive covenant if the original reason for that covenant is no longer here?
Well, Jack, I don't know that that's true. I mean, I think that all three properties are subject to those covenants. So
Hey, Brian, can you take the image down? I can't see anything.
Yeah, the home to the east is also subject. If they knock that house down, they would be subject to whatever covenants, relate to zoning for building a new home on that property. And so, I mean, why are we debating this? I think we're debating this because we're putting ourselves in the feet of the prospective owners, but also the neighbors. And you have a bunch of emails from the different neighboring properties. They seem to have come together on the north and the south. On the east, they've come together with the provision that the people on the east are saying, if a new home wants to build closer to my property than the covenant, allows for, let them come to the village at that time. And so we are putting ourselves in the neighbor's position here. And that's the concern I have on it. North and south seem to have come together. There's nothing to the west. It's really the east.
I speak to the east. It's human nature. All the neighboring houses have had a 2-acre free park for the last 12 years on my client's dime, and no one's going to want development. So everyone's going to get up in arms with any type of proposed development. The house to the east, and you can correct me, Brian, I think is what, 13,000 square feet? Or more like 15,000 square feet?
16,000.
It's 16,000 square feet. And we're talking about building a 5,000 square foot house. And it's not so much for the Weinbergs, it's my client, the Murphys, who got stuck carrying this property for 10 years when they're silent investors. And it was definitely 100% punitive. And I was involved when that historic landmarked house got run into disrepair, got flooded, became a moldy, science experiment that was beyond repair. And we had to tear it down. But at the point, it was punitive against the Marlows, but it ended up being stuck on my clients and fees. It's unfair. This is a very big vacant lot that neighbors in to the east, I've been told, have been, using it for parking their friends' cars on when they have parties. It's just time that restrictive covenants get loosened up and a house gets developed on the property.
I think I have one last question, just move on. There was a conflicting, discussion when I was talking about keeping the setbacks as is and just get approval for the playhouse and the greenhouse. Todd mentioned that, that would be acceptable. Then when Adam and
Todd's our attorney.
That's what I'm getting. I'm getting conflicting.
Okay, yeah, no, we that was not a give that we were comfortable with.
Question that might help frame this a little bit better. Brian, do you know how far from the eastern property line is to the adjacent building?
I think I know.
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
I think I have the answer to that.
Looking at Google Maps, but I can't figure out the property line, so.
Let me it will take me a second, but I'll come back with that.
Okay, that would really help inform this discussion, because understanding the distance between the proposed request and the actual structure to the east would really help us kind of frame how much room there is between it. On Google Maps, it looks like the property line is heavily wooded.
Yep.
When I go back there, I can't see the property line. lines, and I've wandered back a few times over the years. But it would certainly be nice to know if they built to the 50-foot setback that I assume would be reciprocal to the 50-foot setback that the Weinbergs are requesting at a minimum. Which would mean that if the house was built out to the proposed expanded building, that there would be a minimum of 100 feet between the two buildings. Which is a lot of room. But he's making better points. Thank you. So, Samantha, if you can dig that up, that'd really be helpful.
I should have it here in just a second.
So we're relying on the applicant rather than village staff right now, so.
And as long as the kind of in a quiet period here, maybe Brian can answer this. The existing buildable area per the current easement, how much area is that buildable area? Do we know that? It's over 10,000 square feet, probably.
Yeah, I'm sorry, your question again about the easement?
The current easement, how much of a buildable area does it allow the property to have?
When you say easement, are you talking about the
current covenant? The current covenant.
You're talking about the flagpole, the 20-foot width that extends?
No. The entire footprint of the house, which created the covenant setbacks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Relief.
4,000, whatever.
Yeah,
You're
I
talking
could
about
do the math. I could do the math, but I don't know the number. I have to do a quick. I'd have to calculate that out manually, and I'm happy to do that, but I don't know the number of.
Because we keep hearing that the lots, diminish return and the value. I think there's a pretty big footprint to build on. The original house was fairly large.
It was. I'm going to mute myself so you don't hear me flipping through paper.
The footprint was, the footprint itself was the 4675, right? That's the roof lot coverage.
I'm not talking about roof lot, just what's the rectangular box that outlined by the existing covenant to build a house.
Oh, so if we were to change what would that roof lot coverage be?
I'm not worried about roof. How much can you build there? Just how much land is that?
Do you mean in terms of total FAR, or do you mean in terms
Just square footage of the box? The buildable area within the current easements for the covenant.
Well, John, I don't think you could build to the setback lines because the FAR would limit you.
That's exactly where I'm getting at.
Well, right, but one of the issues right now is, in terms of the FAR is.
I'm not even worried about FAR. I'm just trying to prove that there's a pretty big area to build a house. And maybe one of the things you should look at is take that same area and just slide the rectangle to a different spot.
But they were.
Again, it would be a much easier presentation if I had a site plan and a house plan to tie into this to tie in the approval.
But if you look at the trees on the survey, they're trying to save these old trees.
Site plan that says they're saving trees.
Well, if you look at
It shows the current trees.
Figure 1 in the exhibit, John, has the tree layouts.
But no driveways, no parking areas, no sidewalks.
I agree.
Just because the tree's shown doesn't mean they're not cutting it down.
So with all due respect, we're just not there yet.
I think you need to be here before I make any decisions.
That's one vote. So, okay, well, let's. let's take a little time.
For reference.
Okay, excuse me, everyone. Let's take a little time to hear from the folks that have been sitting in the wings watching this whole thing. Kristen, are there any people who have lined up in the queue to speak on this subject?
We have two people in the audience right now. I will first recognize Jack Weinberg. Jack, would you like to make a comment on this?
I'm live. Thank you. This is my son and daughter-in-law. They're fine. I grew up about 75 yards from where they're trying to build. Homes, we've had 4 or 5 houses in Winnetka starting back in the 40s. You know, these are good kids. They're going to be good neighbors. My daughter-in-law, you know, is an environmental science, major in college. My son works for Walsh Construction. He knows what this is all about. They've been absolutely, for the letter of the law, everything that's been asked of them. And President Rentz, I thank you for some of your comments. I get the neighborhood thing. We lived on Ardsley Road. People built houses around us 4 times the size of the house when my folks built a little ranch house in the 60s. My father didn't raise hell and go screaming to everybody that, oh, how can you do that? It's your property. Own it. It's, as long as you're within the village laws, that's your property to develop. But for my son and daughter-in-law, this represents most of their current wealth going forward with mortgage and everything. And what Councilman Swerk, I hear what you're saying, but if you told me that you're going to sell me $100 of gold, but you'll never be able to spend more than $25 of it, you'd say that's a terrible investment. And to have them put literally billions of dollars into this property and house and tell them 30 years from now that somebody can only build a house half of what the normal lot would be in Winnetka. And again, I served on zoning commission in Glencoe. I was president of the park district. I've been through all the NIMBY issues that you possibly can, and I get it. But there's a reasonableness of what you expect when you buy a piece of property and pay taxes in Winnetka. I was employed by the park district in Winnetka for 10 years. This is my community. I'm thrilled that my children desire to live there. There's an economic reality of, if you buy a lot that you can never get the value out of going forward, why buy it? And that's the position my kids are in. How can yes, I understand you want every question answered. The answer is, you know what? They've spent $40,000 on architects already on a lot they don't own. It's a limit to what you can expect these young people to do and be able to go forward. And they can't buy the lot without knowing that they can build something reasonable. You can't ask them to put money into something and then you come back and say, well, you can't do that. You guys, you need to help them develop a lot that's been sitting fallow for over a decade. And I assure you that what they're planning on building is modest and with respectful and with the idea, their parents were 75 yards from there. Their uncle is 150 yards from there now. This is our neighborhood. Please help these kids. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. Kristen?
Next, I will unmute John, no last name. John, would you like to make a comment? He muted himself again, so I'm taking that as a no. And then finally, Teresa. I am unmuting Teresa.
That Sam and AJ would be great neighbors, in asking for this small variance is not a lot to ask for. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
And that is the remainder of the audience wishing to comment on this issue.
Okay. Brian, any luck with the measurements?
Yes, I have answers to some of the questions that you had asked. The first question was what I interpreted was the size of the buildable area that is based on the restrictive covenant setbacks from Trustee Swerk. That area measures 74.5 feet east to west and approximately 112 feet north to south. The buildable area contained within that of approximately 8,360 square feet. And then,
thank you.
Then the setback of the existing residence at 624 Pine Lane. Plat a survey, I'd be happy to display it on the screen, but if you just want the number, that residence is 93.5 feet from the shared property line.
93.5.
Brian,
The
you have
shared
the zoning
property
worksheet, and what is the minimum rear yard requirement for that lot?
The minimum required rear yard for that lot would be 25 feet, but that lot had similar restrictions placed on it with the buildable area dictated on the easterly lot as well. That lot had a pretty substantial amount of tree coverage on it, probably more so than the certainly to the west lot. But so the buildable area for the 624 Pine Lane, I can put on the screen if might be helpful to depict that graphically.
Okay.
Well, Brian's bringing that up. I just want to point out that the minimum distance, if the Weinbergs or future purchasers in 30 years from now were to build to these requested build-to lines on the east, it would be 143.5 feet between buildings.
So if, to answer the question about the setbacks on the easterly lot, to the right of the subject property where the house is highlighted in yellow, the buildable area for the easterly lot is also it's a fairly irregular shape, which was specified precisely to and with the assistance of the village forester to keep the buildable area away from the mature trees on that lot.
And it was 5,500 square feet?
Correct.
Brian, can you clarify your comment about the 93 feet to the shared lot line? I don't know what you were saying there.
Yes, maybe I should share a different screen here briefly.
Thanks.
So this,
That's so much clearer.
Yeah, exactly.
What the hell am I looking at?
What's all that red say, Brian, to the right?
Trees.
So this is the easterly lot line of 630 Pine Lane.
What is? Right there?
The setback dimension from that line. Okay, 93.5 feet. From the property line to the rearmost portion of the Heinz residence.
Okay.
I wish I was better at the annotations. Obviously, that didn't work very well.
No, it was very good. Very good. Thank you.
Look with what you've got. That was good.
Okay, let's bring this thing back then. Give us our screen back, Brian. Okay, thanks. Okay, guys. I'm open to thoughts, suggestions, ideas. John's not comfortable moving forward without more information, but I'd like to hear from the rest of you.
So quite a history on this lot, and it was helpful to understand that. I too was sort of hung up on the lack of detail, just because whenever we approve something, we have certain expectations about the standards and reassurances to the neighbors about what they can expect. And so I understand John's reservations on that front. That being said, I do agree with what Jack said. It's kind of like, what's the purpose of these restrictions at this point? The house is gone. They're going to be taxed on having a big lot that ignores the fact that they do have these restrictions. So I'd be comfortable going along with that and releasing these restrictive covenants that really no longer seem to have good purpose to them. There is a massive amount of distance between the Heinz house and the house. The blob that I see in the picture does look like a nice modest house. I can't comment on its design, but it seems like a nice blob. Nice shape. You definitely want to pin down your architect with more than that, though. You're really disappointed when you show up and they build it. But I'm comfortable with that. And so, it was really helpful to understand the history. And I think whenever we make these decisions, it's good to ask, why was the restriction in place in the first place? And if it's no longer relevant and someone's paying the ridiculous amounts we're paying on these properties, I don't favor keeping unnecessary restrictions in place.
Right.
Can I just put 2 cents in before anyone else?
No, it's like, no, you cannot.
No, just based on the information that Brian gave us on the buildable area of the lot to the east, about 5,500 square feet. And I think there was note that house is like 16,000 square feet. So I don't understand how the subject property is being restricted from building with a building area bigger than the property to the east, 8,360 square feet. It's a much bigger buildable area than the one to the east. And all 3 of these properties have similar covenants that were all agreed upon years ago when it was subdivided.
Right.
So I'll rest my case on that. Thanks.
You're still sitting tight on
box of 8,300 square feet to build a home. I don't know how that doesn't work. Let alone, the greenhouse and the playhouse, I'm okay with that.
There's the roof lot coverage restriction.
Hold on,
right
Penny.
now.
But how do you not fit a house in 8,300 square feet of buildable area of land?
So are you, I just want to understand what you're asking. Are you saying just keep that, but maybe changing the position of that, no, I'm not exactly sure. Are you saying keep the same buildable lot area, but possibly move it?
I don't understand how the house won't fit in there. other than
Well,
maybe 1 or 2 feet,
changing the
like they said, for the garage. The
Well, it's the
playhouse and the
orientation.
greenhouse, that can be added in as a different approval.
Jackie, you'll be next when this all finishes up here, so
What's that?
you'll be next.
Okay.
What John is saying is the lot or the build two lines as is provide ample opportunity to build a pretty sizable house. But he would be okay with the accessory structures being permitted in any sort of approval at this point in time. Is that right, John?
Correct.
Okay. Check.
Andy, of course, stated it better than I ever could. Thank you, Andy.
I was just repeating what you said.
I don't, there doesn't seem to be any village interest in continuing restrictive covenants because the original purpose of the covenants is no longer exists. The zoning ordinances that are already in place in the village protect the village ordinance. I'm sorry, protect village interests and neighbors' interests equally. The trees are protected and would come before the Forestry Commission if somebody wanted to take down a big one. We already have rules to cover this particular area. And again, my decision isn't made on any sympathy for the purchasers on the basis that they think that they should get more than what they're currently in negotiating for. That's what, if you buy a stock, the stock might go up, the stock might go down. You know, if you buy property with restrictive covenants on it or subject to them, that's the risk that you take. So this isn't driven by sympathy for them or believing that they should get what the full value of what they bargained for. It's just based on, I can't see the reason to leave the restrictive covenants in place. And so I think that, like Andy was saying, we should clean this up and remove ourselves from this because there's no further village interest in being something, in something more specific than zoning rules or the other rules that are already in place.
Gotcha. Bob?
Well, Jack, I would counter your argument there. You bought your property and you had that little neighbor next to you with the small home. Possibility of development next to you. Now, if the development next to you conformed with zoning ordinances and so on, then they're completely within their right and you bought into that. I have great sympathy for neighbors, bottom line. I think that and I don't know the Heinzes, so I don't know anything about them, but I have sympathy for them if they bought into a property, that they developed a property that they're understanding that the neighbor property would be X feet away from them. That is our interest. We have as much interest to protect the neighbors as we do to, adjust the zoning for this property. So I think the north and south and west have been taken care of. Maybe there's a compromise from the Weinbergs that there's some middle ground between what they're asking for and what the Heinzes said. I don't know, but I just don't see why we would, impair the Heinzes. I mean, we can sit here and say subjectively, oh, the trees are there and so on and so forth, but they bought into a property with an understanding of what the distance of the home next door would be. And that weighs heavily for me.
Gotcha. Okay. Rob?
Oh, boy. There's nothing that would make me happier than to get the Weinbergs in there and get them started. I know if I was in their shoes, I want the same thing. I have heard personally from the neighbors, because I live only a few doors down, and everything's reasonable till we try and figure out what the land value will be in 30 years and why they want that. I mean, if they're going to continue and they're going to build this structure, and they're going to ask those two little the greenhouse and the dollhouse to be built, I don't think there's anybody here. I don't want to speak for anybody that would have an issue with that. it's trying to get the value for the present, net present, what the value is going to be in 30 years. And that's just, I don't know how you do that. That's just a risk. But I kind of agree with Bob of, you know, how do we boil this work, make it more reasonable and give them more as long as they're going to build what they say they're going to build, but give them more ability to kind of split the baby here. If it's 77 feet they're looking for, we give them, you know, we take it down to cut it in half to 63 or something. I'm not sure if that's even acceptable to them, but I'm trying to find something to help us move forward and make everybody happy.
Awesome. Penny?
I'm with Rob. I mean, it's just that, as I stated before, I have, you know, a bit of sympathy with the homeowners to the east in terms of their expectations relative to the zoning. You know, they bought their house with a very specific restrictions put on their property, and with the knowledge that the neighboring property had very specific restrictions. I do think it's reasonable to expand it. I want this project to go forward. I want these guys to go ahead and, you know, purchase the property and build their house. Do the homeowners have any perspective on
Penny, I
that?
just want to hear what you have to say. I'll deal with the homeowners in a
Oh,
minute.
thank you, Chris. That's fine. Yeah, that's my question.
Okay.
Chris, Chris, there's just one last question. Is it okay if I ask it?
Sure.
It's a rhetorical. The people who bought the land within the subdivision, not just the subject property, but the people to the east and the west, bought land with a restrictive covenant. They also bought land next to a property that had a restrictive covenant. Restrictive covenants aren't permanent, or they can be changed. So those people bought land with the same risk that the Weinbergs are buying, which is that something could happen and they could lose that restrictive covenant, and they could lose the protection of lot number 2 right here in the middle. I just don't see there, you know, as again, they may not like the fact that this could happen, but it's the same risk. You know, that their lawyer should have examined their deed or their purchase and said, hey, you know what? This restrictive covenant isn't based on anything that exists anymore, or that could cease to exist. And you could have a very different piece of land in the future. Somebody could come in and say, hey, I want to get rid of the restrictive covenant because the historic house that it was protecting is gone. So at least in terms of the expectations of the neighbors, I think the expectations of the neighbors, they should have an expectation that we're protecting with a restrictive covenant unless there's some municipal interest behind that restrictive covenant. We can't control any more than I could control my risk when the guys built the giant house next to me. We shouldn't be in a position of controlling expectations on the basis of something extra, like a restrictive covenant. Or at least we should say, okay, but they can also be changed by us when the circumstances no longer justify their existence. And again, I'm not a guy who's in favor of tearing down houses. You know me, I'm a landmark preservation guy. But in this case, I just can't see the sense to continuing to restrict the property when the reason for doing so is gone.
Interesting thing is, Andy and I spent 2 years arm wrestling with New Trier over restrictive covenants on Duke Childs Field. And lo and behold, we changed them. So the point well taken, Jack. Thank you. Okay, Weinbergs. I got 2 people that are not so good. I got 2 that think there should be some middle ground, and I got 2 that said it's okay. Just throwing it out there and splitting the difference. Could you live with a 13.5-foot increase on the east with the full request on the west?
13 and a half.
Yes, we could agree to that.
Apparently, yes.
Yes.
Good.
The last item as well.
I got outvoted.
I'm good with that.
Is that something that's comfortable for you? Splitting the difference, you're on mute.
Yeah, if they're comfortable, I guess my point is we all want to see these guys in the village as neighbors. And I really do understand both sides. I've heard from the neighbors, but I also agree because I was buying it. I'd want some, I'd do what I could do with what the Weinbergs are doing. So if they're okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Okay, Bob? John, can I get you on board here?
Maybe. So going to the west, what's your,
Leave
any
it
change on
as
that?
requested.
Yeah, so now you're gonna have, a 10 or 12,000 square foot buildable area. So I would say no, because they're just making it bigger for no reason. They don't need it.
Okay.
And then going to the east, I would only go as far as the underground stormwater.
Can I
don't know
ask
if it
a dumb question?
Sure.
So if the roof lot coverage is restricted to 7,000, how can you build a house that is 10,000 square feet? It has a footprint of 10,000 square feet. You can't do that, right?
Yes.
Right.
Right. So they already have that restriction built in.
Right, so why move the property line, or why move the house closer to the west or east? When
Well,
all three of these
to the
lots
west,
have
it's not-
the same covenants.
It's not developed to the west, so there's nobody there
Right.
who's.
So I
and
guess
it's
my
just
thinking
providing
is,
them- It's providing them with flexibility, or whoever, flexibility.
On your fights and battles.
so if you want to get rid of these covenants or change the one to the east, to let him build closer to the house, to the lot line. And then
I would say
remove the
yes.
covenants, and remove the covenants on the west lot.
I would say yes. I
Well,
would say remove them from both.
Those aren't in front of us, John, so
No, but
we can't deal with that.
So grant me a raise.
find a couple of feet, but I don't see a reason to change that footprint.
Chris, is your idea here also to provide relief for the playhouse and the greenhouse?
My thought would be that the playhouse and the greenhouse would have to be contained, whatever the new box is.
Are the Weinbergs okay with that? Because that's not what they.
Great.
Absolutely.
You don't want to see him back here again if this passes, so that's kind of the issue. Penny, are you okay with 63.5 feet?
Yeah, and then the west, allowing the shift to the west line is fine with me too.
Okay. Andy and Jack, are you okay there, Jack?
I'm fine. I would just say get rid of restrictive covenant.
Andy, you're muted.
Weinbergs, you sound like you're okay with this then too.
Yeah, we're pretty
Yeah,
happy.
thank you.
Maybe you
Sorry.
do this, you build the house, and then you get together with the Heinzes and you all come back and say, get rid of these stupid restrictive covenants, and we'll do it all at once.
The funny
remember.
part is that we've actually built quite a rapport with the Heinzes. So we actually are friends with them. So it's just kind of interesting. It will all be in the past.
Well, and
Welcome to Winnetka.
this is a very unusual. You're dropping into all sorts of very interesting and complicated issues. So I apologize, or apologize for it being such a complicated discussion. But thank you for your patience.
Hey, let's face it, this is what we all live for. So
Oh, isn't that true? Right? Everybody else thinks we're crazy. It's true.
I thought only the lawyers around here lived for this.
geeks of Winnetka. So here you go. Right.
Yeah,
so
we really-
Peter, can you help me out here? How do we at least get a motion on the table? Got to unmute first.
Here he is.
So I think the motion is to approve resolution R 47, 2020 as is, except for amending the let's just say amending the document to allow the eastern setback to be the foot that you gave, which I don't know.
63.5 feet.
63.5 feet. Everything else stays the same.
All right, that's the motion. Is anybody going to make it?
I make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Yeah, are we approving this? What are we doing here?
Yeah, this is a resolution, so it only requires one vote.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
A resolution a motion to adopt resolution number R47, 2020 as amended, the setback being 63.5 feet.
Right. And that's the motion I make.
Great, okay.
Second.
All right, roll call vote.
Trustee Kripe,
Yes.
trustee Apatow,
Yes.
trustee Lampier,
Yep.
trustee Dearborn,
Yes?
trustee Swerk,
No.
trustee Caladarchi.
Yes.
All right, the motion carries. You're closing tomorrow, and I live just down the street, and so does Rob, so
Keep the
look forward to having a Gatorade with you when you move to the neighborhood.
Well, thank you very
all.
much.
We'll see you there.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging in there.
Oh, man. Okay. There's more.
More. We are moving into late night television.
Eastern time zone, so you got worse, so.
Yeah, me too.
All right, well, we're on to item 11, new business. And this is the comprehensive annual financial report. On 19 audit has been completed. Annual financial report has been distributed to the council and posted on the village website. And even though I wanted to push this off for another week, we're going to hear it tonight. So Tim Sloth, our finance director, and Del Duckworth, our accounting manager, is here. Ron Engman, partner with Laudermill Damon.
Good evening. Presented for your review is the village's comprehensive annual financial report for the year ending December 31st, 2019, otherwise known as the audit. The main point of an audit is to provide the village's financial stakeholders reasonable assurance that the financial statements are accurate and complete. Try and keep my comments a little bit more brief here. Okay, got my notes back, sorry. Ron Amon is here from the auditing firm of Lauterbach and Amon, and we'll break down the report itself a little later as part of his presentation. But before turning it over to Ron, I did want to point out a few items of note regarding the audit. First, I did want to thank the finance department for all their hard work in preparing for the audit and keeping the village's finances organized throughout the year. Especially, I would like to recognize our accounting manager, Del Duckworth, for her efforts in managing a very smooth audit. I invited her to participate in the meeting today. Along with the annual budget, the audit is one of the finance department's biggest projects of the year. And just wanted to give Del some praise because she did a lot of work in putting the audit together. So just to go into a little bit of the numbers in regards to the audit, breaking down some of the major funds. Starting with the general fund being the main operating fund of the village, which posted a surplus of almost $2.4 million. The surplus was a result of revenue coming in favorable to budgeted expectations, while total expenditures were under budget, with all departments operating under budget for the year. Key drivers of the $2.4 million surplus included state shared revenues, which came in at $450,000 more than budgeted expectations, as 2019 was a good year for sales tax, use tax, and income tax receipts. The village achieved almost $750,000 in personnel savings, salaries and benefits. This was due to personnel transitions, i.e. lower labor costs, related to hiring of newer staff, replacing more experienced positions. Additionally, there was some unspent capital, which achieved $760,000 in savings, largely due to a roadway project that was deferred to a future year due to unfavorable bids at the time. And then finally, just across the board, departmental budget savings that totaled $420,000, consisting of items with departments holding line on supplies, repair and maintenance expenses, and consulting services as an example. So in total, the general fund balance currently stands at $24.6 million, which exceeds the fund balance policy minimum of $11.9 million, or 50% of budgeted operating expenditures. In regards to the enterprise funds or the utilities, total cash balances in the utility funds increased 1.6% from $26.6 million to $27 million, with cash positions increasing in the water, sanitary, and stormwater funds, offsetting decreases in the electric and refuse funds. In terms of capital spending, for the year, capital spending totaled a little over $7 million, which was about 38% of the budget. Virtually all budgeted items in the stormwater fund were deferred due to ongoing planning. And finally, in regards to the village's pensions, the funding status of the public safety pension funds increased in 2019. The police pension stands at 68.35% for the year, up from 64.8% in 2018. And the fire pension fund stands at 66% funded for the year, up from 62.7% in 2018. Both of the public safety pension funds experienced solid investment performance for 2019, with both funds up over 17% for the year. So that was just kind of an overshot of the numbers within the audit. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to Ron Amon, partner with Lauterbach and Amon, who is here tonight to present the report in more detail and answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Tim. Obviously, as we all know, it was a unique year. The fiscal year end was December 31st. And as we started to go through the audit process, a lot of things changed. The assurance we need to make to all of our clients is, even though the process changed a lot this year, we still have our professional standards that as an auditing firm we needed to adhere to. So how we got through the audit was very different than in the years past. As a firm, there's a lot of noise in our accounting industry about the remote and the process of this. We're a firm that does not like this remote. As much as the meetings are, you don't have to drive to, or you don't have to drive to clients. We're looking forward to the future years where we can be back on site and continue to build relationships, with the staff and with the village board, et cetera. So 2 pages in the audit I want to just point out real quick is on page 11 in the CAFR itself. The December of 18 audit, the village submitted to the Government Finance Officers Association and once again received the Certificate of Achievement. It's the highest award that a village audit can receive. So once again, the village board should be very proud to be part of this process. And then right behind there is the independent auditor's report. All units of government by Illinois professional standards are required to have an opinion from an independent auditor. Your opinion is clean or unmodified, and it is the only opinion you want from your auditors. And the basis of that opinion is that the financial statements are materially correct based on our auditing procedures. So there to thank staff, because it was a unique year and a little more complicated to get through than the past. So thanks to Tim and all the staff and Dell and Kristen. So if anybody has any questions either about the CAFR or the audit process, I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, guys, any questions for Ron or the village team?
I actually do, but it's so darn late. I actually read this report. Of course, it's great. So just, Tim, just one quick question on the water fund, and my CAFR blew up on me. I showed it to Rob earlier, and the binding came off. I'm just messing around here. But on the water fund, the expenses were significantly lower than budget, like $1 million. Why? Can you remind me why that was? Or remind us why that was?
Yeah, that would be due to unspent capital expenditures. As I referenced in my remarks, we had a roadway project which had a corresponding water main component to it that we bid out in 2019, and we received unfavorable bid results. So we postponed that project. If you remember, that was part of the IEPA loan process. And with trying to adhere to the IEPA loan requirements for that small project, in terms of IEPA scale, it led to unfavorable bid results, like significantly unfavorable, that we could not proceed with the project. So that it was deferred, and that kind of skewed the number lower in the water fund.
Is that 1.3 million?
I don't have the exact amount handy of that project. I can pull it up real quick.
I mean, that was a huge swing on budget. And then while you're looking at that, I'm not gonna ask some of the other questions I had, but there's a comment on page 25 that I'm interested in. This is really more kind of looking forward, where you talk about the liability, our insurance position, that we have a $2 million reserve or retainer or whatever it's called. But then you say that that's a reason why we should have a conservative reserve policy. And I guess my question is twofold. One, were you going to review all of our liability policies? Wasn't that a project that was sort of on the board at one point, to look at all of our insurance and to see if our, the policies are scaled properly and so on?
Yes, we have been looking into that. And as of December 31st, 2019, we're still technically on the old program, which was a $2 million retention. As of January 1st, we switched to the new program, which lowered our retention level significantly for many of our lines of coverage. So now that we've had that lowered coverage, yes, we will be looking into the exact fund balance policy and whether it makes sense to continue carrying such a high level of fund balance within that fund.
Okay, so there is this relationship that might play into the 2021 budget.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And what, Bob, can you expand that? What is unfavorably? Are we talking? Or are you?
No, this would be favorably. So it would be, we lowered our retention limits on many lines of coverages from $2 million down to $100,000. And so we still, for certain lines of coverage, for others, it's $250,000. So we'll reanalyze what the fund balance policy makes sense for that fund, given outstanding claims and potential future claims. But it'd be, we anticipate that the fund balance policy could be lowered pretty significantly within that fund.
Okay, and on the liabilities, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only bonds that we have outstanding relate to stormwater. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, and the terms on those bonds, Tim, I've asked you this before, but I think you told me these bonds cannot be refinanced. Is that correct?
They have certain refinancing opportunities along the way. So at certain points, years, they could not be refunded. But when
we have that opportunity coming along here or not?
I think that would be part of our overall stormwater discussion, Trustee Dearborn, and we would anticipate having that discussion this fall. But we can follow up on the actual dates. I don't know that we'll have them handy and the terms right now for tonight.
No, I agree with that, Rob. But I mean, actually, I think that the refinancing of the bonds is sort of independent of stormwater. I mean, given where municipalities are, rates are, the yields are today.
Yeah.
It just, if we could do it, we just refinance the same dollar amount or whatever.
No. I understand. They're in pretty close horizons together. I just don't recall the actual dates for tonight, but we'll follow up with you with you and the rest of the council this week.
Okay. If there's any way to do that, I mean, we should take advantage of it if we can.
Certainly. We'll be in touch with our financial advisor at Spear, Kevin McKenna.
Great point.
All right. I've got about 6 other questions, but I'm too tired to ask them.
Bob, if you got questions, this is the time to get them out while we're here.
They're going to be mainly budget related, Chris. So I think that, I mean, 2019 was exceptional and this report is exceptional. So I commend the finance department and the whole staff for doing a great job on this report. But I think it, you know, some of these issues, you know, whether it's financing or liability or whatever, will inform the 2021 budget discussion.
Agreed.
Yeah. Trustee Dearborn, we'll follow up with you regarding your other questions so that we can get them accounted for.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Any other questions for our team here today?
It's good reading.
Great job, guys. Very good. Thank you.
Cover too.
Thank you.
Ron, I have to say that I've been watching you perform now for quite a while, and I'm always impressed with the work product that you come out with, and the completeness, and the fact that you know, it really enables the community to hold on to a really exceptional bond rating. And I mean, without this good work, this sort of diligence and oversight, certainly we could be a much more comparable position, especially in crazy times. But you know, we go into our storm discussions with a lot of comfort, knowing that we have a solid rating, that people that are potentially will achieve for us have a good, solid report out ultimately, and it'll hopefully be a really important tool to maintain our solid rating. So, thanks again for your great work.
Thank you for that, but always keep in mind it takes a team. And so it's not just our team at Lauterbach and Amen, but it's the village team that helps get through the process. So we appreciate it from that side as well. So
I agree. And Del and Tim have done an awesome job as we have seen in years past. Del, I'm sorry we can't see you, but thank you again for your hard work. Can't hear her either. Oh, there she is.
I'm here waiting and just listening.
There you are.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
You even got mentioned in the report, so you must be doing something right.
Nice job, Del. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, anybody else with questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll let the finance team go. Thanks again, guys. We appreciate that.
Good work. Thank you.
You know, as you get together with Bob on what he has, you know, kind of hanging in the weeds out there, maybe if we all could get a copy of the Q&A so that we have a understanding of the issues about and how we're addressing them. So, is that okay, Rob?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. All right, gang. Moving forward, item 12, appointments, there are none. Item 13, closed session, there is none. So we've got to that wonderful part of the evening. 14, the adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Dearborn.
Yes.
Trustee Kripe.
Yes.
Trustee Swerk.
Yes.
Trustee Caladarchi.
Yes.
Trustee Lampier.
Yes.
Trustee Apatow.
Carries, and we stand adjourned. Thank you, and we're 3 minutes from my head blowing off. So.
Wow.